Okay. I'm going to get started. So I think we'll probably see a few folks come in and I'll monitor that, make sure we get people in. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning post eclipse. I hope you all had a magical and great experience in collective awe. It's not often that you get to experience collective awe. That's what I'm calling this. My name is Connie Beal. I'm United Way's Working Bridges Director. Welcome. We have some new faces. We have some new partners who've come on board recently. Welcome to the partnership. These innovation labs are designed to be space for our HR partners to come and explore topics that impact employee retention, productivity, wellness, stability, all of the pieces that your employees need to show up and be fully present at work. We like to talk about topics that can get in the way and that can support employees and try new things. So sometimes what happens at these labs, we learn a lot from partners, we learn a lot about what's happening, and then there are times when employers want to explore that further, and we can engage with you more in that vein or explore partnership more closely. It's a chance for all of you to come together and see each other and connect with each other. So hopefully you'll be able to make connections here and get to know each other. We typically do this virtually, but we do have spaces in South Burlington and in St. Albans where folks can stop in and view and have a cup of coffee or two or three. I'm on my second. So what else can I share? There are a couple updates from Working Bridges that I think I can, that I'd like to share with you that are helpful for everyone to know. And you'll be getting an employer update soon, but there are some program things that are important. And then I'm going to introduce our guests so that we can get started talking about the impact that violence can have and sort of our role in workplaces and in community and like how we can disrupt the sort of a culture of violence and what our role can be to support people having what they need for safety and in relationships, but out in the world as well. I know that the impact of violence in workplaces and the impact of violence in our communities is something that's always on our minds, and that I think we all recognize here that we all have a role to play, something that we can do to support less violence, so we can disrupt that. But program updates, welcome folks. Please just, if you just arrived, put your name, organization, position in the chat so we can know who we have today. And the updates I want to share with you though, let me find my screen here. So there were two things that are sort of, three things. I wanted to thank partners that were involved with our visitors from United Way of Greater New Bedford. So wave if you know what I'm talking about. We had, hi Tanya, we had our sort of colleagues from United Way of Greater New Bedford arrive, and they were able to visit with some of our employer partners. So I know in Northwest, they were able to visit with Edland and Rhino. Thank you for opening your doors and being there to speak with them. They're actually working to launch their own program with the business partners in their area in Massachusetts. So they came to do a deep dive and to learn from all of you. Some of our partners were able to connect with them. And that's one update I wanted to share with you. The other piece, we're doing some work right now. For those of you that have any interest in this, please reach out to me after. We are doing some work with the prevention centers on excellence, on a workplace-based employer toolkit to support prevention messaging and prevention resources in workplaces, and that's prevention of substance misuse. So if any of you have a particular interest in that topic, or if you haven't yet connected in this, please reach out to Tanya or myself on this, because we're both, sort of part of that work group that's formed, if you'd like a chance to understand what's happening in that space. Last update. Just make sure I don't have anything else is pressing. The last update, and I'm excited to share this, the FINRA. So some of you know about the FINRA work that we're doing, and the FINRA being the the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, and they're an organization that has supported Working Bridges over the years. We're working on a project right now that has two aspects happening. One is a deep dive on a 10-year look at what Working Bridges is up to, and they're doing a sort of a research project on that, and that culminates in a documentary. So I just want to flag that as there may be opportunity in the months ahead, or weeks and months ahead, to engage on that, and you'll hear about it. You'll also, the other project is we're working with FINRA and Inform USA to redevelop the national credential that supports resource coordinators. So we are all community resource specialists, but there's a effort underfoot to actually develop that further for workplace-based resource coordination. So those are the updates. Exciting. And I think at that, I'm going to leave it and just let you know that you'll probably be hearing more, from your resource coordinator, from, the quarterly employer update that should be going out soon. But I want to shift gears and welcome our colleagues, our friends from Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We have Sarah Robinson and we have Faye Longo, who are with us today, who will be sharing a little bit about an initiative called Uplift Vermont. And Faye, I'll hand it over to you. Faye's the Director of Organizing and Community Engagement. And Faye's crossed paths with our team in lots of different ways. So we're really, really grateful she could join us in this role to share more about Uplift Vermont and how, as we support employees in lots of different ways, how can we create workplaces that are safe, where everyone can really get what they need and feel safe from violence. So take it away, Faye. I'm going to share your slides too. That's on me, isn't it?
Thank you, Connie. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to see familiar faces, and I always love getting to see Connie. I'm really excited to be here today to talk with everyone about Vermont Network and a little bit about our exciting campaign, Uplift. Can everybody see the screen okay? All right, I see heads nodding. Before I jump in, I'm just going to share a little bit about my facilitation style. I want folks to feel comfortable hopping off mute and just jumping in if you have a question. Please don't worry about interrupting me. It won't mess up my flow at all. And you're also welcome to put questions in the chat. The benefit of putting questions in the chat is if I don't get to them during the presentation, I can always I can address your question in the follow-up. Connie has PDFs of the slides today, and she'll be sharing those afterwards so folks can have that information. And the links in the presentation are live, so you can feel free to go through and click through them if you desire. But hopefully this is just the beginning of a conversation. And if you have questions, you'll reach out to Sarah or I, and we can answer them directly. Next slide, please.
Sorry, it's just a little slow maybe, or maybe I'm not on the right screen. Bear with me, folks. Ooh.
Connie, thank you for navigating this with me. And thanks. I see it now. Thank everyone for your patience. This is our agenda for our time together today. I know that we have a little under an hour, so I'm going to try to be really mindful of that. My hope is to give everyone a quick intro into the Vermont Network and what we do, and then to talk about businesses Uplift and why building a violence-free future is good for business. I'll talk a little bit about the Businesses Uplift Pledge and supports that are available to businesses who want to jump in on Uplift. And then we'll wrap up with some actionable next steps that folks can take. Next slide, please. So let's start with a little overview of Vermont Network. And Sarah, I can't see you, but please feel free to jump in at any point. Um, so the
Great.
Vermont
I just thought I'd say a quick hello and say hi to everyone. Sarah Robbins here. I'm the Deputy Director of the network, actually joining you from the State House today. So I'm going to be a little quiet, but I'm here and also happy to help answer any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. So the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence is the leading voice on all things domestic violence and sexual violence in the state of Vermont. We are a statewide nonprofit dedicated to creating a violence-free Vermont. We're a membership organization, and our members are 15 independent nonprofit organizations throughout the state. And those members provide direct services and support to victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence of all ages. In addition to supporting our member organizations, the Vermont Network also grows change makers through our training and leadership development programs. We host events and trainings like our annual Shine event. And we engage in public policy advocacy and organizing. Sarah's at the State House representing us today. In everything that we do, we center the voices and experiences of survivors, especially survivors on the margins. So this includes survivors who are justice involved, who are deaf or hard of hearing, or who are marginalized in other ways, folks in the LGBTQIA2S plus community. And we also provide some direct services. So this map shows our coverage areas between us and our member organizations. We cover every corner of the state. Next slide, please. So in everything that we do, all that we do is about building a world free from oppression, where actions, beliefs, and systems support all people to thrive. And our work happens at the individual, organizational, community, and systems levels, all with the aim of changing cultures of violence. And I'm sure that you can already tell our work looks like a lot of different things. It looks like network partners providing direct services to survivors and people who choose to engage in violence. It looks like advocating for changes to laws at the state and federal levels, training advocates and partners to be agents of change, creating systems that serve the basic needs of all survivors of domestic and sexual violence. It looks like working with partner organizations, reforming our legal system, and next slide, through Uplift Vermont, it looks like being in beloved community with and supporting survivors, businesses or organizations, and communities as they envision and build a violence-free future for all of us. So Uplift Vermont at its core is just that. It's about building a violence-free Vermont for all of us. Because domestic and sexual violence is everyone's business and it affects all of us to some degree, and it is wholly and completely preventable. So Uplift is a grassroots community made up of survivors, allies, business leaders, and communities who are dedicated to promoting awareness of the impacts of violence and committed to building cultures of nonviolence. So this is ongoing work, and businesses who are involved in Businesses Uplift are saying, hey, I am dedicated to being in this conversation and to doing the work that it takes to build a violence-free future. Next slide, please. So to understand what a violence-free future looks like, we have to have some understanding of what a culture of violence is. So this wheel is this kind of displays the different elements of power and control that are involved in cultures of violence. And research that has taught us that domestic violence and sexual assault, it's all about power and control. So this is what builds that culture of violence. And we have whole trainings dedicated to exploring this. There's tons of research on it that folks that we can share, and folks are welcome to explore themselves. But as business leaders, whether you are an employer or not, you play a huge role in shaping culture and developing social narratives. And we need your powerful voices as we work to build a violence-free future for all Vermonters. Something that I wanted to share that I actually learned recently is that violence is actually a learned behavior. Like, I knew that people who are exposed to violence tend to engage in violent behaviors more often, but I honestly did not realize or consider that violence is not just a natural thing that human beings do. Like, of course, we are naturally programmed to act aggressively as a means of survival, but other violent and aggressive behaviors, like those we see in domestic and sexual violence, like coercion and control, power and oppression, these are learned behaviors. And it always reminds me of the amazing work happening in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Where we know that things like racism, sexism, homophobia, all of these isms lend themselves to the othering and devaluing of whole populations. And it's that othering and devaluing that lends itself to cultures of violence. All of it, as you can tell by the wheel, is very nuanced and intricate. And again, it's wholly and completely preventable. Next slide, please. When people think about violence in the workplace, they're usually not thinking of domestic violence, right? Like, when I first think of violence in the workplace, I immediately think of sexual harassment trainings, and I think of active shooter drills, because that's what I was mostly exposed to through my previous places of employment when it came to workplace violence. So people aren't thinking of things like sexual assault or stalking when they think of violence in the workplace. Um, but violence in the workplace can look like so many things. It can, of course, look like active shooters and like brawling and fisticuffs, right? But it can also look like any form of unwanted contact from someone engaging in abusive behaviors, like phone calls, emails, text messages. These are common forms of violence happening in the workplace that can go unnoticed or unseen, and they're utilizing oftentimes workplace systems, right, to engage in this violence. So I do want to note that these kinds of behaviors affect both the person choosing to engage in the abusive behavior and also the victim or survivor. At work, this can look like a loss of concentration or a sense of always having to be on guard. It can show up a lot as absenteeism or lateness. And most often, for the person experiencing this, it shows up as job performance issues. All things that can have a lasting negative impact on the survivor or victim. And this is where we as business leaders and as employers can step in and negate some of that. Next slide, please. I'm gonna share just some data with you all because it's important. So we estimate that each year approximately 40,000 individuals experience domestic or sexual violence. And I feel like we are all well familiar with this data point, that like 1 in 4 people in any room at any given time have experienced some form of sexual or domestic violence. We also know that 51% of all homicides in Vermont are domestic violence related. And the public cost of sexual and domestic violence in Vermont totals over $111 million per year. Nationally, 60% of survivors report losing their job, and 96% said their performance at work suffered as a consequence of their abuse. 3 out of 4 survivors of domestic violence cite economic insecurity as the main reason they stayed with their abuser. And homicide is the leading cause of occupational injury death for women nationwide. And more than 50% of stalking victims report being stalked at work. So we can see that this is a problem in the workplace. Next slide, please. And just to reiterate, like, yes, this is a huge problem and it is preventable. So thinking on, I've been talking a lot, and this can be a little heavy. So please feel free to take a collective breath. Whew. I would like, if we can, Connie, I would like for us to go into breakout rooms, maybe in rooms of 2 or 3. Is that possible, Connie?
I believe so. I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute, folks. And what I'll do, let's do some breakout rooms.
While Connie does that, I will copy and paste the question in the chat box so that you all have it. I'd like you all in your small groups to talk about experiences where you became aware that an employee had experienced or engaged in gender-based violence. Thinking about what we just spoke about, what that can look like, right? It can look like a lot of different things. I'd like you to think about that and then describe what tools do you wish that you had to respond in that situation. And I'll put this in the chat. And then when you all come back, I'll just ask for somebody to volunteer, a few folks to volunteer, and just kind of share out whatever you're comfortable sharing that came out of that conversation. Connie, I'm going to stay in here with you.
Okay, I think I'll stay too. And you tell me when we should close the rooms. I'll leave that open for now.
I forgot to tell them how long they have.
No, can I do a time warning? I wonder,
I think
Yeah,
you can.
you can broadcast it to the room.
I can, yeah, I could give them a warning, I bet. Yeah, I see broadcast. I'll try it. How much time do we want to give them? Or do you have what is it, 9:25? 9:30?
I'm thinking we could give them. Hey, let me just check
Maybe 10
something real
minutes?
quick. Let's give them like 8 minutes. I know that's a weird number, but
I'll just send them, so.
You could just say, we'll bring you back at 9:34.
9:34 AM. Then,
thank you, Connie.
no problem. Okay, there they go. Should have gotten that message, so. We hope.
I saw it.
Okay.
So they saw it too.
I'm like, I think I sent it. Sometimes it's like sending things out into the great void. I'm like, I think they're okay. I don't know. Oh, Sarah, thanks for joining us from the State House.
It's not my plan for this morning, but I don't make the plans this time of year. So anyway, I'm happy to be able to be here.
Way to just be where you gotta be. Yeah. Thank goodness for technology letting us do that.
Yeah, it's great.
You know. I wish we could be in all of those rooms right now. I bet they're having really good conversation. I think that's Elizabeth with us, possibly.
It's a great group of folks, Connie, that I saw come in and introduce themselves. And it's so funny. We have both the food science, but
and Rhino Foods.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but darn tough and food science are both in our little office plaza, which is funny.
I mean, they're your neighbors, right? They're right there. It's fun to connect with all of the companies and see how they connect with each other, because they might have relationships or like connections in their work. And yeah, we just brought, so Columbia Forest Products and Cabot Creamery are our 2 new partners. I know. And then in June 1, we're launching NRG in Heinsberg. So I know we've got three in this next 6 months, basically 3 new partners that are coming on board, but
Fabulous.
yeah, I'm excited to talk with you, Faye, more, because earlier we were
Yeah,
talking about the idea of engaging employers more in this content and like, and maybe through a toolkit or developing, I mean, we would love to be part of that. It's, let me say we, but I'm sure employers here would want to continue the conversation. And some may have more interest than others, but I suspect we have a core group here that might really like to help if they can and give their input. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So it's it's interesting because I think the resource coordinators, I saw Nicole is on, Nicole Clements, and Tanya's there. But I know the resource coordinators, if we were to talk to them too, they would be able to tell you how they've seen
That's
it.
exactly what I was thinking too.
The resource coordinators might have a perspective they could share that, oh, I know they can. I could give you probably 3 situations right off the hand, off, like in my brain, just from working in workplaces and how domestic violence, particularly, also sexual violence, sometimes combined, like it's not, it's with us, whether we, it might not always become obvious, but resource coordinators usually will get into the conversation.
So
Yeah.
when I was at Vermont Food Bank, we were a Working Bridges
Yes.
place, and I
So,
did connect with you all because I was navigating a really unhealthy relationship, and I got some services that aided my ability to move away from that, right?
I'm
Like,
so glad to hear that. Nice. Nice
but I
work.
think about that a lot in this position, especially like part of what Uplift is about is like, of course, as the network, we have access to some really amazing subject matter experts and tools and resources. And places like Working Bridges are doing such good work in this area that sometimes are like, we don't always have to be the one to do the thing. Maybe we could also play the role of ensuring that employers are connected to these other amazing resources like Working Bridges too, you know?
I think that's one of the, like, that's the resource coordinator being a bridge to lots of different paths for support and resources, right? It's that's our job, is to not, we're not the expert, but we're gonna be the one on the bridge to help you get to the thing, right? Or
Sarah, Connie, when I was originally working on this presentation, I thought I was presenting to the resource coordinators. Like I thought that's who the audience was. And Sarah was like, actually it's employers. And I had to like shift
yeah, yeah.
my thinking, but that's what I was thinking at first because I was like, what a great resource this is.
I know. I definitely, well, and that's the other part, like our team is growing in lots of ways. And we've got 9, 10, I think there are 11 people now. No, 12. If so, Lamoille County has a resource coordinator, and they're coming, they have a slightly different start. They started with a mobile resource navigator. And
Oh,
so
cool.
their role was more in community in relation to the recent flooding that Lamoille County experienced. So that was when they really they launched that idea. But now going forward, there are, I think, 4 different employers, they said, that are interested in continuing this and having that resource navigator. I say that because there's also that level of like, how do we support the resource coordinators in their training and development and in conversations about safety for them? Because it's
Oh, yes.
an interesting sort of,
Well, it's like
different
it's
level.
secondary trauma too. There's definitely secondary trauma happening in that role, I think.
Yeah, and so the secondary trauma, and then even we talk a lot about just space and like workplace spaces and just being safe when you're in the workplace
Yeah.
and meeting inside the building so that you're not outside while someone's abuser's picking them up, right? Or and that they're now seeing you as a target,
Oh, yeah.
a challenge, or that you're triggering an argument now, right? There's something that like suddenly it's become a problem. We talk about that a lot, like as far as getting the boundaries of where, how are we resource coordinating, and how do you do that. Well, it's
And because historically, so much of the conversation around this has been stigmatized and right, like that's their business. That's their personal business. We don't get involved in that. Like,
Yeah.
just look away, don't say anything. Like, you know what I mean? Like in Vermont, I think especially this is like the narrative that we hear so often. And
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard because I think people, and at workplaces, it's such a tricky space too, because you want everyone to have dignity and safety and to not have to address it if they're not ready and to address it when they are ready. And you have to hold space for both, right?
exactly.
And that's so challenging because it's hard to always be able to assess what someone needs or and in a workplace, because workplaces come with hidden rules and expectations. And so this is so good. And I think this is probably just the beginning of us figuring out how to, engage more. Yeah, it's great. It's so good.
Any opportunity to work more with you, I'm in.
I mean, there's that too. It's like having like I don't know, cherry on top, or having a banana split with I'm like, oh, so we're gonna do this work. Great. No, I'm looking forward to it. I've been so looking forward to reconnecting with you, Faye. It's so nice. So I'm Sarah, this is great. I'm so glad this happened in the time that we started to connect, and then you
I'm
found Faye.
so glad I could make this happen for you both.
There. This is perfect.
Connie, you're so sweet. All right,
Oh,
we
thanks.
should bring folks back.
All right. I'm gonna close them all. Close all rooms. 60 seconds. All right, they got 60 seconds. All right, we
Oh, I
can.
forgot about that.
I'm sorry, I should have, now, okay, now we're.
No, we're good. We're
Okay.
good. Everything is going to plan.
Thank goodness.
I feel like we never have enough time when we have breakout rooms, right? We probably pulled you all back in right as you were like really getting into your conversation, or left you in there way too long and you're like, finally, we're back in the big room. What does anyone feel comfortable coming off mute and sharing a little bit about like what came out of that conversation, or similarities, tools you wished you had?
So I will share, Faye. In my
Thank you, Lori.
in my group, we had not, or at least we did not think that we had experienced gender violence. We were thinking mostly it was like harassment type issues. And that's what we kind of talked a little bit about. And we had not, neither of us had directly experienced it. It was known of other people. And we wish that we had the tools. If we ever do, we want the knowledge and the tools and the words to help with a person in that position.
Are you looking for another volunteer?
I am Heidi.
I can go, so we can get rid of the awkward silence.
I'll sit in awkward silence for a long time, just so y'all know.
We talked about a variety of things. So we talked about like building the trust with the person. We talked about navigating like different resources and time off. The two colleagues that were part of my breakout group had way more experience than I did, but they talked about how navigating the time off was the low hanging fruit, and some of the other pieces were more elevated. And then we had a good conversation about relationships in the workplace and like how that becomes a piece of the pie, and how it can be, you know, kosher, but how it can also be that power center piece as well.
I'm taking notes over here in the background.
I can go and talk a little bit about what we chatted about. I think it was a few key points we chatted about were, how to walk that balance of making someone feel comfortable, whether it's because they're ashamed or don't want to make a big deal about it to anyone. There's a few examples we shared about moments like that where, how do we address those situations and make sure that we respect everyone's space when it comes to things like that, and just walking that delicate line. But then also we talked a little bit about the at home situations that then trickle into work, and how it's you can't just shut that off, whether it's via phone or um, just not can't get it off your mind, and so having it affect your workplace, um, and what having those resource coordinators there too to help kind of be that third party that the employee could then go to help navigate some of these issues. So it's good chat.
You just brought up such a good point that we were actually talking about in our group too, is the role that resource coordinators can play, especially in relation to every workplace is different. Every organization or workplace has its own culture. And in some cultures, it is more beneficial for staff and everyone involved, right, to have a third party who's neutral in the situation to assist the employee that's navigating that, and what does that look like, and how can the employer help so make that connection for people. I'm also noticing, I think in everyone that shared kind of mentioned how do we have this conversation? How do we hold this space where people feel safe communicating about it so that we can even start to address that there is a problem? And like, how do we, what was it? I think is it Daisy?
Dasi.
Dossie. Dossie, I think that you said that delicate balance. I heard that in whatever so far from everyone that shared. I don't know how many groups we had.
I was just going to follow up with one other observation. Also, thank you all for those conversations, and say that one of the things I also heard was sometimes we think about domestic or sexual violence as actual physical violence that happens between two people. And that is probably the most common and easily identifiable form of it. But when we think about sexual harm or the spectrum of behaviors that might exist when domestic violence happens, sometimes it doesn't even include physical violence. And so I think part of our understanding in workplaces is also thinking about where might there be behaviors or things that our employees are experiencing that may not involve physical violence, but are indicators to us that perhaps something could escalate towards physical violence. And where in our cultures can we support those healthy workplace cultures that interrupt the environments where like sexual harassment, for example, might happen. And so there's just a really wide spectrum of places that I think businesses can find themselves in, both interacting with their employees and also the kinds of cultures that they're building at their organization.
Thank you, Sarah. That's such a good point. I won't continue to hold awkward silence. So if you would like to share, but you're not comfortable speaking in a group, which is totally understandable, please feel free to put comments in the chat. Connie, would you share screen again?
Yes, I had one thought too, actually.
Please.
I wanted to share, and the times where the resource coordinators, whenever we've been in situations where we've helped employees to address violence within a relationship, often it comes with these additional resource trade-offs, these other challenges that sort of like, and I think it's an interesting, it's an important part of the conversation to talk about, is that relationship violence often comes with housing instability, transportation challenges, like that. When you, and I think I'm speaking to the choir possibly, but just thinking about like, this is where I see employees needing the support is maybe they're ready to leave that relationship, but then it also means they need a plan for their housing and their transportation and food and their childcare and their family. Like it can totally snowball. And I think partners here who've experienced that with employees or saw that see that challenge, like I think that's where it can feel overwhelming and a little scary of like, I want to help you, but it seems like it's this big thing. And what do you do with all of those challenges that follow? Go ahead, Nicole. I'm going to share screen while you share your.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Connie. I mentioned this in my group. Like during this meeting, I just received a text from someone that's experiencing exactly what we're talking about. And her text said, I've been sleeping in my car for the past 2 nights and decided I need to reach out for help. I'm very scared, like all of the stuff you just mentioned, Connie. So when we finish this meeting and I reach out to her when she's ready to talk, I'm going to be navigating housing. I'm going to be navigating probably food for her and trying to get her into help. And again, luckily we have this great network and I know that we'll be able to help her, but she can't even get her brain around it because she's in it right now. So again, it's everything. It's not just the violence, it's their whole life that we have to kind of think about. And I think that that's a big fear and a reason that people do, as Connie mentioned, like don't make that move because so many other things are going to be in.
Thanks, Nicole. Can everyone see the screen now?
Next slide, please. This is just a really good quote about nonviolence culture and how it is a personal virtue, but it's also a social virtue. So it's something that as I think I spent the last 2 years working with women entrepreneurs at various stages of business. And something that I found is that many people that are in this business leader space don't always view themselves as business leaders, right? But even if you're not an employer, if you own a business, you are a change maker, you're a culture shifter, you are a leader. And this is even more so true if you are an employer, right? Because you're helping build a whole culture for all of your employees to engage in, and that ripples out into the world. I have been so affected by every place that I have ever worked for in positive and negative ways, mostly positive, right? And so I think about that, about the power that we hold as business leaders to change this narrative. Because violence is a learned behavior, that's terrifying and exciting, because if it's a learned behavior, we can choose to change it, right? Uplift is all about that choosing to change, to utilize the power and privilege that we may hold as business owners, as leaders, as employers, as people in this world, to envision a future free from violence. And I get so excited about it. Next slide, please. I did this before we went into our breakout rooms, but and if it's okay with folks, I'm not going to let us take a break because I realize I probably let us be in our breakout rooms a bit longer than I should have. And I want to get through everything. But look at this cute dog. Like, look at how happy this dog is just taking a breath. I hope that we're also there and doing what we need to do to care for ourselves in this moment. So now that we've talked about, right, we've laid out what the problem is. We know that domestic and sexual violence is a problem for workplaces. Hopefully I've made the business case about why it's important to prevent this if possible. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to talk about businesses uplift. What the heck is this? And again, because violence is a learned behavior, the kind of violence that we're talking about when we talk about domestic and sexual violence, it is a behavior that can be changed. It's a element of our culture that can totally be changed, totally be prevented. Next slide, please. So Businesses Uplift is essentially an annual pledge. We've envisioned Businesses Uplift as a coalition of businesses and business leaders who have pledged to actively engage in learning and leadership that fosters a violence-free Vermont. And this is going to look different for different individuals or businesses, right? But we know that when businesses commit to addressing violence, it improves the health and well-being of their workforce, both within and outside of the workplace, right? That ripple effect that we were just talking about. And Uplift businesses essentially take this annual pledge that commits them to taking part in at least 3 actions per year. And actions happen at one of 3 levels, right? So there's the direct or learning level. And this can be attending a training. It can be making a direct donation to Vermont Network or your local member organization. It can be volunteering at that organization. It can be joining our mailing list. So a direct action or a learning action. And then the second level is an organizational or business practice. This is where you adopt a code of conduct. Maybe you adopt add something to your employee handbook that an employee experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking can gain access to so much paid time off, right? That low-hanging fruit, or that you'll be willing to navigate that with them by offering a flexible work schedule. Like there's a number of areas where you could engage in organizational or businesses practices, especially around policy or codes of conduct. But it could also look like training staff or allowing your staff to volunteer. And then there's the advocacy actions. So these could look like hosting a community conversation to talk about cultures of nonviolence. It could look like writing an op-ed or going through a power mapping exercise. It could look like becoming a mentor or an ambassador, recruiting other businesses to sign up as Uplift businesses. At the base level, though, Uplift businesses, like I said earlier, are committing to engaging in the ongoing work that is required to build cultures of nonviolence. Does anyone have any questions about this before we move on? I can't see the chat. All right, I see Connie's thumbs up. Next slide, please. And we're not expecting folks to do this alone. There are supports available. And like I said at the beginning, I hope this is the beginning of a conversation. I'm available to you as a support to help develop this. We provide business coaching to help folks or get you connected. There's technical assistance available, access to Vermont Network staff like myself, curated resources. There are trainings available, tons of templates and tools. Connie and I will hopefully be having conversations about some others that we could develop in partnership. And I'm looking for Sarah to see if there's anything that she'd like to add for this slide specifically.
I think Sarah stepped out because she had to go to committee.
No problem. Thank you. The key point is that when a business signs on to the pledge, it's not like you're signing on to it and we're like, okay, go have fun with that. We are here to support you to achieve those 3 commitments, right? Because we are just as dedicated and committed to building cultures of nonviolence as you are. And so we want to do this in collaboration and partnership with you. So I just want to be very clear about that. And sometimes that would even look like connecting you to other resources too. Next slide, please. So we wanted to be sure to leave you all with some next steps. To be clear, we've been working on Businesses Uplift for a few years now, since COVID. And I'm brand new. I'm still in my first month in this role, and Uplift is my project that I'm super excited to adopt and engage in. So we're still developing what that pledge looks like. So we're going to have a soft launch at our annual event, Shine, this fall. Prior to then, though, if you're interested in staying informed about Businesses Uplift or the overall Uplift campaign, you can visit this link and sign on to stay informed. You can also keep an eye out on our newsletter. We'll be giving updates there on our social media. But my hope, my secret hope, is that you'll reach out to me directly, especially if you're interested in piloting the pledge with me. So that means I'm trying to get a small group of businesses together to work with me directly to kind of try out some of the actions on the pledge, provide feedback, tools that we develop to review them and provide feedback, things of that nature. So if you're interested in that, or if you just want to connect with me directly, you can also visit our website and fill out the little inquiry form at the bottom. Yeah, and keep an eye out for our soft launch this fall, and our official like big launch is going to happen next spring. Next slide, please. We're going to skip this because we don't have time for that. And then I think the next few slides are just for your information. So this is more information about our network member organizations. If you're curious about who serves your area, there's this awesome map. You can find out more about our network, our members at this link. And then mine and Sarah's direct contact information is on this last slide. Please connect with us. We want to hear from you sincerely. Yeah, especially in this kind of early stages where we're kind of figuring out how to help and support businesses in developing cultures of nonviolence. If you have ideas on how we could do that to help you step into this space and feel fully supported, let me know. I want all of the ideas. Are there any questions or comments? Faye, this is a crazy harebrained idea. How are you ever going to make this happen? With
I
the
want to
support.
thank you. I want to thank you, Faye, because folks, we're getting a sneak peek of the campaign. Like this whole idea is, you're the first to know. Like, think about it. Like, I'm so excited because it's like the beginning of something, and I hope everyone takes something away from this, and at whatever level feels good, and makes sense for your work that can support the employees that you support. I think this is really great information, Faye, and helpful for everyone to take this away, take it back to your teams. Think about the ways how does this show up in your workplace? To what extent do you feel like there can be work done in this space? You know, it's really, I appreciate you all spending time on this today, and Faye, for your time and expertise. I look forward to connecting more about this. It's something that's on our minds. It's on my mind a lot as we work with employees, and it's one of those things I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation about how we continue to support employees that experience domestic sexual violence and or violence in the workplace, right? It's really, we all have a role to play, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Hey, Caleb, everyone, folks, enjoy your day. We're going to close out now and send you back to your day. All right. Enjoy the rest of your week. And
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you,
Thank
Connie.
you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Oh, Connie, stop recording. Stop recording.